on behalf of the Board of Trustees, welcome to this wonderful weekend, which we hope you're enjoying and enjoying the time with your child. Particularly as the day turns even more beautiful, I think you'll agree there's no better place to be than in Vermont on a fall morning. I'm going to say a few words about the college, and then you will hear from Mariko Silver, president of Bennington College. And let me start by saying this weekend is all about the experience your student will have here at the college. But to understand Bennington today, it helps to know a little bit about the college's history, and that will be my assignment. Bennington was founded in 1932 with a radical plan to offer a progressive, experience-based education that regarded the visual and performing arts as equal disciplines to others. This was a radical idea. Bennington saw a need in the landscape of higher education and responded to it. In those days, students were required each year to work off campus for a period each winter, the original field work term, although it was called something else. And they had to work on something that complemented and expanded their academic pursuits. At the time, this fusion of intellectualism and applied skills was unheard of in higher education. Then, as now, our faculty members were teacher practitioners and mentors. Then, as now, our curriculum was elastic and responsive to faculty and student interests. And then, as now, students were expected to be the drivers of their own education. These are the pillars on which the Bennington tradition was built, and you'll recognize all of them in your students' experience here today. But it isn't merely our programmatic innovations that have set Bennington apart from the start. At the heart of the Bennington philosophy is a belief in forward motion, in staying nimble enough to respond to the needs of the real world and courageous enough to do it first. We have always had an eye towards the future, and that is an essential part of our legacy. As Mariko likes to say, Bennington alumni go on to be change makers, world builders, and groundbreakers of every stripe. We attract faculty with great vision and students with a desire to tackle the world from a new angle. From the very beginning, artists, intellectuals, and pioneers have gathered here at this incubator of collective discovery and perennial innovation. And so it is today. Many of those pioneering alumni you will already know by name: food writer Michael Pollan, photographer Sally Mann, actor-screenwriter Justin Theroux, and Peter Dinklage of Game of Thrones fame. I could go on. But Bennington has always been about more than just growing extraordinary individuals in a range of fields. Because of our commitment to interdisciplinary and collaborative learning, we also cultivate a community that is greater than the sum of its parts. We've been the birthplace of big ideas and historically important trends, culminations of curious minds from varied perspectives. As you may know, Bennington played a prominent role in many movements within mid-century modernism, with faculty artists like Paul Feely, Jules Olitsky, and Sir Anthony Caro. And alumni like Helen Frankenthaler, Cora Cohen, and Maren Hassinger began their creative lives on this campus. Noted authors Donna Tartt, Bret Easton Ellis, Jonathan Lethem, and Jill Eisenstadt, often called the Literary Brat Pack, were all students together here in the mid-1980s. We tend to identify cultural shifts early here at Bennington, and we've spotted more than a few luminaries in the wild before the rest of the world caught on. Poet E.E. Cummings gave his first public reading at Bennington. Jackson Pollock held his first retrospective here. Obviously, a Jackson Pollock fan in the audience. Well, we'll see what, what he or she has to say about the next. And an unknown singer named Bob Dylan, any reactions, performed in 1961 in Commons, and then returned in 1963, where he shared the lyrics of The Times They Are A-Changin' with Asylum magazine, which became the first publication to print those lyrics. Suffice to say, Bennington's rich and vibrant tradition continues to this day, and now you are all part of it. I studied music and social sciences here in the early 1970s. It was a winding road that got me to Wall Street, where I've practiced law for many years. But the unconventional path I took at Bennington was essential to what I do. It shaped my process as a thinker and as a problem solver, and my worldview in countless ways. That's why I've remained engaged and committed to the school ever since, and now have the great privilege to lead the college's Board of Trustees. The most rewarding thing about leading the Bennington Board is that we share with the faculty, staff, and students the responsibility to ensure that Bennington continues to innovate and adapt, continues to push on what a liberal arts education should offer in these challenging and changing times. Bennington is revolutionary by design, so every forward motion is also a reaffirmation of our core values and a reconnection to our origins. So with a nod to our revolutionary roots and an eye on the future, we help Bennington in the vanguard of higher learning. I should say, we help keep Bennington in the vanguard of higher learning. We help ensure that every student who walks this path is prepared for the world as it is, but eager to improve it. And with that, I'll hand this over to President Silver to talk more about what we do here and why. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Can I just ask a quick question? How many of you are here in support of a first-year student? Second? Later? Then second? Alums? So some of you are both. It's always nice to see. So welcome and welcome back. Welcome back, too, to those of you who were just here dropping off your children, who, as I said, when you drop them off, your children who are no longer children. They are now Bennington students. And I want to share a little bit about the community that those students have entered, those of you who are here supporting students who are further along in their Bennington journey. Maybe I'll pass the mic over to you guys to do the Q&A, to talk a little bit about what it is to be a Bennington parent. But I want to talk about some new things at the college and talk about some of the work that we're doing on an ongoing basis. And I promise I won't take too long, because I really want to hear from you about what you're thinking about, curious about, and interested in. So since last fall, when some of you were last here, we launched and made permanent the Lucille Lortel Foundation Fellowships in Theater that enable Bennington students to spend their fieldwork terms in New York working at off-Broadway theaters with free tickets to off-Broadway theaters, understanding and learning about, yes, the artistic and creative side of theater, but really also the business side of theater. What does it take to make a go of it? And this we're doing in collaboration with the Lucille Lortel Foundation, and we're very grateful for their support. We also transformed and reopened the Robert Frost Stonehouse Museum. Some of you may have had the opportunity to go there last night to hear Jay Perini speak. That's open to the community throughout the summer and into the fall. And we are, importantly, too, in the last year of a 3-year grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which has enabled us to do some extraordinary rethinking of advising. And for those of you who are parents of first years, your first years are experiencing the second year of First Year Forum, which is a new advising and support structure that we have created for students. And of course, you've all seen the construction fencing around the Commons renovation project. This time, when we're together next year, we'll be eating and talking in that building. So I look forward to welcoming you all there. As Alan said earlier, Bennington is revolutionary by design. So every forward motion is also a reaffirmation of our core values and a reconnection to our roots. This commitment to adaptability, to cultivating an environment that responds to the needs of the world, is we feel particularly critical right now. It's always been important. It's part of the reason why our traditional commencement statement talks about, yes, individual development, but also constructive social purposes. But we see an extraordinary engagement from today's students in wanting to make the world better than they've found it, from any number of angles: more beautiful, more open, more community-oriented, more peaceful, more engaged. And we want to make that possible for them here. And I do want to take a moment to say, too, that at a time when our culture, our current society, appears to be confusing being networked with being connected, and being connected with being a community, there really is no substitute for true human engagement and collaboration. And that is what we lift up here. Whether students are studying dance or theater, visual arts, technology, even when they're doing something from a great distance, for example, over fieldwork term with one student working in a refugee camp and another student based here or in New York City or in San Francisco as some kind of refugee support organization. We know that what they're doing is building community because they learn to do it first, face to face. And we reinforce that here in everything we do. It's part of the living learning environment, it's part of the small classes, it's part of the direct engagement, both with faculty and with one another, and with the challenges of the world. Of course, we ask students here to do that a little bit differently than other places. We ask them to do it in ways that are fundamentally interdisciplinary, in ways that are question-driven, in ways that provide space and openness for them to create new answers. I've long had a mentor who said to me at once, if we think the world is perfect as it is, then we already know all the answers. If we think the world is perfect as it is, then we should continue to replicate the kinds of institutions and interactions that we've long had. But if we think there's even one thing that needs changing, we need to start looking for new solutions. And that's what Bennington students here do every day. Recently, an alum, Anna Miljacki, I've not met her yet, so I haven't asked her yet to pronounce her name for me, but Anna Miljacki, who is a Bennington graduate and heads the Master of Architecture program at MIT, was quoted in an MIT piece saying, "At Bennington, I suddenly had room to think about philosophy and literature and architecture and set design in the same context." She now runs the architecture program at MIT, and she credits that openness and expansiveness of her Bennington education, combined with the depth in each of those disciplines and the collaborative engagement that she had here, with enabling her imagination that has driven her career. And that's what we look for all of your students. And that's why we have the plan. Those of you who are parents of first years may not be hearing yet too much about the plan, but you will. You're probably already hearing about fieldwork term, which is our students' opportunity to go out in the world with fundamentally actually quite low stakes. Each engagement feels like high stakes, but I always say, and students, you can close your ears, I always say it's better than midlife crisis, right? So if you go out there and experiment, you go out there and try something new, you may find that the thing you thought was your dream job actually isn't. You may find that you don't want to teach preschool, right? You may find that you don't want to be a clinical psychologist. You may find that you don't want to be a lab researcher. But having those 4 fieldwork terms enables you to try and try again. Sometimes it's trying the same thing in a different context, but sometimes it's trying the same questions from a different kind of career angle. So I often think of a student whom I met in my first year here who started out sure that she wanted to be a clinical psychologist. She spent her first fieldwork term working with a clinical psychologist, decided she definitely did not want to be that close to people's problems, and so she decided to back away. And then she thought, well, maybe I'll be a school psychologist. And so she went and spent her second fieldwork term in a K-12 environment. Decided that actually she wasn't that interested in young people. She wasn't that interested in K-12 students. She spent her third fieldwork term in a psychology research lab and loved it. She'd found her environment, she'd found her community, she'd found her way of engaging the questions that animated her. But the questions that that particular lab was working on were not the questions she wanted to work on. So her fourth fieldwork term, she found the sweet spot. She found the lab environment and the set of questions that was interesting to her, and she went straight on to graduate school. Now, Everybody doesn't have that linear of a path. She had a very particular focus. But it gives a kind of example of the ways in which students can use a variety of experiences to build up their knowledge of self, their understanding of what motivates and what moves them, to bring that back into the classroom and then back out into the world. And students understand this. They learn it over time, but they also understand something that I think is actually very hard for those of us who are, let's just say, over 40, to wrap our minds around, which is that the work world is changing extraordinarily rapidly, and it doesn't show any signs of abating. The economy is becoming more modularized, people's ideas of what makes a career are shifting, and the ways in which we are all going to have to be increasingly entrepreneurial are shifting under our feet, and they're shifting around us. And in that sense, the students see the present, and in it they see the future. So fieldwork term is also an opportunity for them to try to understand how they want to weave a life through this changing work world, and in some cases, advocate for policy for this world to change in very particular ways and not others. These things don't just happen to us as humans, we enable them to happen as a collective. So we have increasingly students who are interested in questions of social safety net, who are interested in questions of government and governance, who are interested in what it takes to make a community and help a community thrive, to make an economy and help an economy thrive. And we want them to use the fieldwork term and the classroom to explore those ideas from multiple angles, whether they're going to grow up and be visual artists, dancers, makers, or they're going to grow up to be lawyers on Wall Street. So I want to leave time for your questions, but for the first-year parents, I just want to articulate something that your students have been hearing quite a bit lately, and will be hearing throughout first-year forum, which is an articulation of the fundamental capacities that we expect to deliver through the course of a Bennington education. The capacity to construct a course of intellectual inquiry, to perform sophisticated research, to create and revise their work, to engage with others, and to communicate their work to the world. Now, your kids may not come home at Thanksgiving and rattle off those 5 capacities. I think chances are they won't. And they might not come home the second year and rattle off those 5 capacities. But as parents, you have, and family members and other supporters, you have an extraordinary job now, which is similar to but different from the job you had when your children were in high school and maybe when your children were at home with you, which is to continue to support them, to engage them, to look for those opportunities and those moments where they're learning, where you can see their mindset, their brain, their way of thinking, their way of engaging the world at an inflection point. You can see that hinge, that turn. In those moments, look for the development of those capacities and look for opportunities to help and coach your students, our students, your children, into developing those capacities. They may not think about them in those words and those terms, but if you think about them, you'll know that that's what it takes to make a successful life. So think about the ways in which you can encourage them to develop those capacities, not just in the classroom and the fieldwork term, but also in their wider lives, be that on campus or when they're at home with you or when they're out in the world. So I would encourage you to get engaged in that way in your students' education. You can be engaged too in the institution. Parents are extraordinary at offering fieldwork term opportunities, yes, to their own children, but also to their children's fellow students, housing, all kinds of work opportunities and mentoring opportunities. We want you in their lives in those extraordinary and important ways. So I want to thank those of you who I know have already offered those opportunities to students and encourage those of you who haven't had the opportunity yet to do so. I'm just going to quickly introduce a few people who are here in the room who you might not yet have met, and then we'd open it up for questions. Isabel Roche, Provost and Dean of the College, if you guys can just stand up and wave your arms around. You can clap or not. They won't take it personally, you don't know them yet. Xenia Markowitz, Dean of Students. Lori Kobik, Dean of Studies. And Faith McClellan, Director of Fieldwork Term. So they will be here throughout the day, throughout the year, throughout your child's experience to help them navigate, and as needed, help you navigate, help you understand a Bennington education, help your children move through a Bennington education. And for those of you who are parents of first years, welcome to the community. For those of you who have been with us longer, welcome back. Thank you. is on. I just spoke into it.
Oh.
There we go. Okay. It's like magic. Questions? Comments? Everything's perfect? Yes.
My son mentioned that you're going to try to grow enrollment over the next few years to up to 1,000 students.
We're not going to grow over the next few years to 1,000 students. We don't have enough housing for 1,000 students. What we do want to do is, first of all, expand the range of students to whom a Bennington education is available. We do that importantly through financial aid and other kinds of support. We also want to think about growing slowly, incrementally. Bennington has extraordinary benefits from being small for students and faculty alike. It means that we are, in many ways, a cohesive set of communities. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are making the breadth of opportunities available to the range of students who would benefit from a Bennington education. And I think it's important that students, frankly, no matter where they come from, would have an opportunity to have access to this extraordinary education. So I think we have a broader societal obligation to think about what the right size is, at the same time as we have an obligation to our internal community to think about what the right size is.
Yeah, I would just say that it's not growth for growth's sake. It would be growth for, with the objective of making a Bennington education not only more available, but to make it even richer than it is. And so there is lots of conversation with all of the community participants on that subject. So any growth that we have will be very, very thoughtful and very premeditated.
There's another question in the middle.
Thank you. My question is actually related. So my understanding is that there's already a little bit of pressure on the accommodation, and I was wondering, you just said it's going to be incremental and so on, but I think from the students' perspective, it's feeling like a lot of pressure, and there seems to be some anxiety that they're losing the essence of Bennington. And this may or may not be related to that, but I know that the decision-making around whether you get your courses and so on, the add drop and all that in that first couple of weeks, certainly my child found it extremely stressful over the summer, not knowing whether they were going to be in any of the classes that were related to her plan. So I'm just wondering, is that related to how many students? Is that just the way Bennington works? But
Is your child a first year?
going into second.
Going into second year, okay.
Yeah. So, but I understood all of her friends were having similar challenges. So I didn't know if that's because there's many more students, or. But the whole idea of the individualized education relates to then having those options available, right? So.
Yes, absolutely right. And I would say, so in terms of numbers overall, I think between 4 years ago and now, we've added about 20 to the total head count. So we're not talking about large, and that's over the course of 4 years. So we're not talking about large numbers. And I think last year, the incoming class was 7 students bigger than the one before, and there was a lot of talk about how much bigger it was. So just to give a sense of scale, in terms of being admitted into classes, all students should know going into the summer which classes they're in, unless they're courses that were added to the curriculum over the summer. I don't know if, Laura, you want to say a word or two about that. I don't know about your child's particular case, but the registration happens in the spring for students who are not first years. So we can talk about the particular, but students who are not first years register in the spring. The only courses that kind of are maybe dangling out there or not confirmed are courses that are added over the course of the summer. So they couldn't have registered in the spring for them because they didn't exist yet. Other questions? Yes? You're being converged upon by microphones.
So I have a couple of questions. Is that permissible?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll start.
We'll see what they are.
I'll start with the first. You know, last night at the supper, the farm-to-table supper, there was this bold sign from the students, Mom, please help us with insurance. And I wondered about that. I talked with one of the students and I said, are you ratting out the school, you know, because the parents are here? And she said, yes, exactly what we're doing. But I had a, you know, I don't know the whole financial deal of the school, so I'm looking in and maybe I'm off base and crazy or just, you know, dreaming. But with the field work term in place, then the heat is off in a lot of respects for finances directly relating to the students for almost 3 months. So there's because they're not on campus and they have to pack up their stuff and put it away, and then they're going and they're, you know, they're making way for their, you know, eating and housing, you know, someplace else. So is there any kind of room in there with, and Bennington at the same time is taking in a lot of money, renting out the place. Is there any room to maybe shift some of it to the insurance? Because it's crazy scary for some of the kids, and I know Bennington's pretty generous with low income. You know, there are a lot of families here on that. So I know it's like, well, why would we give even more? But for those kids, it could be terrifying to get sick.
So a couple of clarifying things. So in terms of fieldwork term, it's generally 7 weeks in the winter, and it starts right after the holidays. So it's not just to clarify the timeline, it's not a 3-month hold. We have a number of students who do stay on campus for fieldwork term. They work on campus or they work locally and they stay on campus for fieldwork term. And we do have one program that runs over the winter fieldwork term, which is our low residency MFA in writing. But we don't rent out the campus when the students are gone.
Okay.
And some students, in order to make room for those graduate students, do pack up their stuff and store their stuff, but it's a mix. So a couple of experiences mixed in together there. But in terms of, excuse me, the health insurance in particular, so this was a year and a half ago, is that right? A year and a half ago. So we had a health insurance provider that was providing health insurance for about 20% of the student population, 15 to 20% of the student population. That specific health insurance provider opted not to provide health insurance for us, and they didn't tell us until May, basically. So we had a kind of a scramble, honestly, to make sure that all students were covered. So we worked individually, student by student, to make sure that they had health insurance.
Okay.
There were some students who were not enormously timely in calling us back when we reached out to them about their health insurance. But by the time they came back, and all the students had health insurance, and we worked with them individually, one by one, to get health insurance. And if there are other questions about health insurance, we can cover that. But now all of our students are covered. We offer a range of plans. We couldn't offer the same plan that we offered before, and more students now are on their, for the US-based students are on their parents' health insurance because they can be on their parents' health insurance until 26.
So could it be that the kids who put that sign up are, you know, as uninformed as me, or is there something, I mean, you guys are hearing them and are gonna work with them about this, and maybe something will get better.
Yes, and so we had a lot of conversations about this when it happened.
Yeah.
There are students, I don't know who the particular students were who put up the sign,
I don't
so
know
I can't.
I just know that they you know, I wanted to hear them.
Yeah, yes, and there are students bring things up all the time. I'm always happy to meet with students. I'm always happy to talk with them, as are my colleagues, Isabel, Zania, Lori, Faith, others, depending on what the issue or the question is. So, you know, it's one of the benefits of being a small community is we always want to talk with students. And we actually, a couple of years ago, we had a lot of interest from students in the divestment movement for endowments and institutional investments. We worked with a group of students, actually the Board of Trustees worked directly with a group of students to change our investment advisors and move towards SRI and ESG. The students were terrific about learning about and understanding the parameters for investment, what it means to have fiduciary responsibility, all kinds of things that they didn't think they were signing up for when they asked the question, but they really got into it, and actually they elected one of their number to come down to New York and sit and listen to the pitches of the 6 or 8 investment advisors who wanted to bid the business of managing the investments of the college. And their input was essential and really valuable in selecting an investment advisor, and in the end, we all agreed.
You know, one thing that is, I think, pretty unique, and it has a lot to do with size, is the students have access to virtually everyone. In fact, we regularly, when we're on campus, the board has lunch with members of the student community. And,
Just yesterday.
in fact, we had one yesterday, and they are absolutely not bashful about sharing their
You'll be shocked to
concerns and their ideas, and they're very, very lively conversations. In fact, I was saying to someone just before this meeting began how comfortable the students are really talking to almost anyone in the community about what's on their mind, and that's, it's very fruitful for everyone.
Well, I feel as a parent, because of that small deal, I'm definitely heard, and we've gotten a huge amount of help just navigating. So I think what you're saying is, you know, there's tons of evidence for it. But my next question, while I'm offering conspiracy theories up here, is you know, concerning, and I don't really know how to express it completely, but I've heard from a couple of students that there's some secret point system in admissions, and that it's changing from accepting kids, new incoming freshmen, that are maybe considered more problematic. It's not a question of intelligence or ability, but maybe they are less proficient at working a system, and that there's a kind of a gravitation to getting, you know, maybe a more Princeton-oriented kind of kid over here. Am I just making things up? And if so, here's the thing: if
news to
that's
me.
true, if that's true, I would
It's news
hate
to
it,
me.
because I think it's such a great campus to. I come from a prep school, university school of Nashville that did change, and it did take the dive to get more funding, and it started being more prep school and less, you know, just a higher, more progressive deal. And I would hate to see that happen here. That's
So
all.
it would be news to me. It's news to Tony, who runs admissions. So he's in the back there. You know, I think that the only secrets that I know of at Bennington are about the ghosts in Jennings. So, but yes, well, I'm here to share with you. But so the short answer is no. The longer answer is not only do we look at every individual student, which is why, for example, we're test optional. We were one of the first institutions to be test optional. And in fact, you know, we say test optional, but we're even a little, I wouldn't say anti-test, but we're leaning away from the test. And we were one of the first institutions to introduce what we call a dimensional application, which really opens up the application process for students who have something else to say and some other way they want to say it than the traditional kind of Common App formula with the essay and so on and so forth. So we really want students to bring their most creative selves to the admissions process. We want to maximize the ways in which they can do that. And you know, even from students, you can close your ears, but even from a purely sort of marketing point of view or market positioning point of view, our value is in our distinctiveness. There's really no value for us in trying to, as you say, the Princeton model, right? Trying to square out our corners or whatever the metaphor would be. And you know, you know, we get some of those students who want to find their creative selves, and that's terrific. But that's why they're coming. If they wanted to go to Princeton, they would go to Princeton. Not that there's anything wrong with Princeton. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jessie White, and first of all, it's quite refreshing. I work at a higher ed institution, so I understand, you know, the background, but it's really quite impressive that the entire administration, as well as the board, is available to the students to reach, you know, if they have a concerning issue. So that's refreshing, so that's good to hear. Now, a question for you. What is the smoking policy for on-campus and especially in the residence homes?
Zania, would you like to take that one? Just as an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Hi, Xenia. We met yesterday and 2 years ago.
Hi. Ken, you might have to help me with this, Director of Campus Safety. So there is no smoking in the residence halls, and the rule is 30 feet from any entrance.
It's 30 feet from any door and window from any building is the smoking policy, and there's no smoking or lighting of anything in any building, which would include
Anything includes weed?
incense. I'm not sure what weed is, but I don't know if we have that here.
No.
Anything
Drugs?
federally recognized as banned substance, yes. Anything you can light, you can't light in the building, pretty much. Candles, incense, weed, cigarettes, even the vapes, they can't be used. What else do they light? Any students here want to recommend what you light in your rooms?
Probably not.
We do have, sometimes we struggle to push them 30 feet away. The biggest struggle, the compliance, is really getting them far enough away. I know they know what 30 feet looks like, but that social setting sometimes sets in before they start thinking.
Okay, so question, how do we address an issue, a big one that I experienced today personally?
Like any student, you can reach out to Campus Safety, you can reach out to me, and we follow up on each as they unfold.
Excellent, I'd like to do so. My student has been dealing with this for a year and a half from when I just found out today, and it really concerns me, because being asthmatic, smoking is bad, but when it's weed, it's worse. And I've actually had to take 3 sprays since I left a house. So it's disconcerting, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I like to go about it a professional way to address it. So however we can get some assistance with that, I'd really appreciate it.
Unequivocally. By all means, we can address that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So the question is, what would it take to declare this a smoke-free campus? Was it the question?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yes.
So I would love to do that. There are students in the room, they're looking at me like I have 17 heads. I would love to do that for all kinds of reasons, most of which are probably obvious to many of you. The question that we always face, frankly, so to Ken's point about following up on every incident, is what's the best use of our resources on campus in terms of enforcement? So that is a challenge, and on a certain level, we know that it can't be, if we were to, for example, become a smoke-free campus, it can't be fully enforced unless there's peer enforcement, and we have to build up some of the structures to make that possible. And spending a lot of time, as some of you do, on college and university campuses, I have yet to be on a smoke-free campus that's actually smoke-free. And so there's also a challenge from a community standards perspective. If you make a rule and don't enforce it, what happens? So we are inching out from those doors and windows to try to limit the places and spaces in which people smoke, because it not only affects the person who's smoking, but to your point, it affects all the people around them.
I truly hate to be so vocal, but may I?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, good Lord, it's college, and they're coming from all over the world, and for some people, a cigarette is communal. It's not everybody's reached a level of uptightness or, monitoring the world for fun. People used to talk to each other. Now we write down in blogs and protest why we hate each other so much. Let's all come together. It's not going to come together if you can't figure out. If you don't like a cigarette, walk away. It's not going to carry that far. If you do like one, find some people to smoke with or smoke by yourself, but let people have a little room to breathe. And then you marvel less why people are, it's funny, but we do have a right to not hang out with a smoker or to hang out with a smoker, but we really don't have a right to say, everybody close down and let's do this formula of just completely guarded, I'm going to be just a pent-up human and then expect us to have a peaceful world. And these kids are trying to come up with solutions, and they're trying to relate to one another, and sometimes it means sitting and smoking or tolerating somebody else with a vice. I mean, we're not in the Westboro Baptist Church. We're trying to be people. That's all.
So I'll just extract one thing from that, which is that we're doing a lot of work, Xenia and the Student Life team doing a lot of work on student self-governance, really setting norms together, really understanding what kind of community we want to be, That doesn't particularly center around smoking, but I think it's part of a larger engagement that's incredibly important about helping students to learn how to craft community, how to build community, doing that with them as authority figures so that they're also learning how to engage different kinds of authority to make the world as they want it to be. Because in fact, that's what we want them to be able to go out and do. So whether it's a protest sign or it's a heated conversation about smoking and who gets to do what where, you know, these are important conversations. It's our job to help facilitate them. Students have to be in them because, as I said to some of you this morning, it really is a moment in which, regardless of your political affiliation, many of us seem to have forgotten how to create community, how to talk across difference, and we're very much invested in building that into and continuing to build that into the Bennington education. And it can take many, many forms. Yeah.
First, just an appreciation for the Dimensional app, which my kid used to great effect. And we also really appreciated that when Ada was accepted, their words were quoted back to them. Obviously, the application had been truly digested and paid attention to. So thank you. And then secondly, I've been really impressed with the amount of advice a first-year student gets. There's, I think, a faculty advisor, a first-year advisor, and isn't there another kind of advisor? A fieldwork term? I mean, there are a lot of meetings you can have. So I guess, which is great. But I'm curious going forward, who helps the student integrate these various kinds of advice going forward? What does that look like in the second, third, and fourth years? Thank you.
Isabella, Lori, do you want to take that?
Hi, and hi again. We met at orientation. So the mechanism for that is through the plan process. That's really the integrating structure. So once students move through the first year, we have the first year forum that Mariko referenced. Every student has a faculty advisor through the first year forum. They also, through academic services, we have our first year experience program. There's a lot of staff and Kate Child in particular who works with the first year. So it's really an advising in the round model. Fieldwork term preparation is integrated into the first year forum. Thereafter, as students move through into the second year, the third term is when they propose their plan, and at that point they will have switched to a new faculty advisor who will shepherd the student through the plan process, and the plan committee will sit and read the essay, think about the work, think about the dimensions of the questions that the student wants to ask and bring forward, and then really be the group that works with the student from there through the senior year. That's right. So fieldwork term, as both Mariko and Alan referenced, is an integral structure for us. It's in between the two terms. The experiences are brought back and reflected upon, and it's a way to, to put it as simply as possible, to learn through doing work. We think about student learning happening everywhere. Indeed, it does. And the learning that happens through work, whether it be fieldwork term, whether it be a job on campus, whether it be through community engagement opportunities, all of those things are brought back. They develop the capacities that Mariko was referencing, and they're brought back into the thinking about the plan. So I hope that, yeah.
There also continues to be ongoing fieldwork term advising for students who need it and want it, and there's advising staff also that are focused on the years following the first year. Other questions? Well, I think the sun was threatening to come out. So I hope you all will enjoy the day. And tomorrow's actually supposed to be very sunny. So enjoy the day, enjoy the fall feeling for those of you who are from California, and enjoy the classes and enjoy hanging out with your children who are no longer children. Welcome to Bennington and welcome back.
Thank you very much.